Back in 2016, something started spreading across my Xbox friends list. One by one, everyone I knew from Black Ops 3 lobbies started disappearing not off my friends list, but into a different game entirely. A brand new title I had heard people buzzing about, but never really cared to try myself. I already had Call of Duty, I didn't need anything else. Or at the very least, that's what I thought. At first, I just ignored it. Every time I logged in, I saw the same thing, playing Overwatch, and every time I told myself it was just a phase. The hype would die down, they would come back, and we'd all return to custom games of cops and robbers on Nuketown like always. But that didn't happen. If anything, the hype got louder. This was a problem for me because this is the same friend group I had been playing with since early high school, people I had practically lived in Xbox parties with. If all of them were migrating to something new, then part of me knew that eventually I'd either have to follow them or get left behind. But I still held out, I was still being stubborn. I couldn't tell if this is something they'd actually keep playing, or if this is just another one of those quick purchases that we'd all move on from in about a week. Then one night, while we were all in another party chat, one of my friends said to me, "You just don't get it." After that, he sent a YouTube link, and that link led to dragons. The cinematic opens with Hanzo sneaking into an old temple, moving through it like someone who knows every inch of the place. He silently takes down a few guards, not dramatically, just with the quiet efficiency of someone who used to belong there. And then the narration starts. Right away, it pulls you in. It sounds like a folktale describing two dragon brothers, one who upheld duty and another who strayed. Even before the story connects to the characters, you can feel the weight behind it. As the narration plays, Hanzo lights an incense and attempts to grieve the brother he believes he killed. It's calm, restrained, almost peacefully quiet until he's interrupted. A masked man appears, deflecting his arrows and pulling him into a duel. Their fight mirrors the legend being told. When Hanzo summons his dragon strike, the blue dragons crash forward, only for the masked man to answer with a green dragon of his own. This was the moment my friends wouldn't shut up about. It wasn't just some cool looking dragons colliding in midair, it was myth meeting reality. After being bested, Hanzo demands to be finished off, but then the mask is lifted and it's Genji, alive, telling Hanzo that he still has a future and that he still has something to atone for, but also that his story isn't over. In just a few minutes, the short delivers guilt, myth, anger, forgiveness, and real character growth, an entire history compressed into a single sequence. That was the moment I understood Overwatch wasn't just another shooter, and it was also the first time I realized something else. This wasn't just a story my friends were chasing, it was a feeling. The shared excitement, the world that felt alive. That's why they left Black Ops behind. They weren't just playing another video game, they were stepping into a universe. I didn't know anything about Overwatch's gameplay, but in that moment, I understood why everyone couldn't shut up about it. So I caved, I downloaded the game, but more importantly, I was joining something much bigger than my friend group. Overwatch wasn't just popular in 2016, it was everywhere. Twitch streams, YouTube compilations, cosplay, fan arts, esports, even people who had never touched a shooter before were suddenly talking about their favorite characters and main picks. This wasn't just a video game, it was a community. It was a world people wanted to believe in. Because Overwatch's identity wasn't built on power fantasies or gritty realism, it was built on hope. On the idea that even in a broken world, people would still try. That heroes weren't chosen, but self-made. That no matter their background, country, species, mistakes, or scars, everyone still had a place. The tagline wasn't ironic, it was a promise. The world could always use more heroes, and at least for a while, it felt like we believed that. But that world didn't last. When Overwatch 2 was announced, the reason for the sequel was clear: the campaign. Blizzard promised story missions, character progression, talent trees, new cinematics, an actual narrative continuation of the world people had fallen in love with. Overwatch wasn't just going to tell stories through trailers or limited timed events anymore. That was the pitch. That was the reason Overwatch 2 needed to exist. So when Overwatch 2 finally launched and the campaign just wasn't there, the confusion was immediate. The marketing had been about the PvE, the BlizzCon panels were about PvE, the sequel announcement trailer was about PvE, and now it was gone. quietly, almost deliberately, like Blizzard had hoped it might be able to slip by unnoticed. It didn't. For me, it wasn't just the community reaction, this hit personally. I was someone who got pulled into Overwatch because of the story, because of dragons. This was a world that felt like it had something to say, and while the actual game itself was a lot of fun, I had also spent years waiting to see where a lot of these threads would go. So when the campaign just didn't show up on launch day, it wasn't just disappointing, it felt like the sequel had forgotten what made this game special in the first place. The first wave of review bombing wasn't anger, it was betrayal. Not because the game had changed too much, but because it had barely changed at all. Overwatch 2 felt like Overwatch 1 with fewer modes, new monetization, and a vague assurance that the real game would arrive later. We were all told to wait, to trust. But then, after months of silence, Blizzard finally announced that the campaign mode, the feature that justified the sequel, the thing Overwatch had been building towards since Dragons, was no longer happening. It wasn't another delay, and it also wasn't a rework. The thing that justified the existence of Overwatch 2 was cancelled. That's when the second wave hit, harder than the first. Now it wasn't just disappointment, it was the realization that the Overwatch people believed in, the one built on hope, unity, heroism, and story, was gone. Overwatch 2 wasn't a bold new chapter, it was the moment the illusion broke. And in the middle of all this confusion and frustration, there was Kiriko. A brand new character marketed as the face of the sequel. She was the one thing that clearly signaled this was something new, but everything surrounding her felt old, unfinished, or taken away. She didn't cause the frustration, but she arrived at the exact moment a lot of us were losing trust. And as a result, she became the face standing in front of all the promises that Blizzard couldn't keep. Sojourn and Junker Queen had already existed in the community's imagination before the sequel launched. Players expected them. But Kiriko, she arrived hand in hand with the new monetization system, the battle pass, the shop, the trust us things are different now messaging. She didn't cause the frustration, she simply stood in front of it. Which is why people talk about her differently, and also why her reputation is a lot more complicated than it looks. Kiriko's debut in 2022 was supposed to be a bright spot, a new cinematic, a new hero, a new reason to believe Overwatch still meant something. And on the surface, her introduction looks like it follows the same pattern as every beloved Overwatch character before her. A small, emotional story grounded in a personal moment rather than a world-ending threat. But when you look closer, especially in context, the cracks start to show. Most Overwatch cinematics are named after themes, not characters. Dragons isn't called Hanzo, Recall isn't called Winston, the Wastelander isn't called Junker Queen, you get the idea. Even the last Bastion, despite having Bastion in the name, is not just about the character. It points towards ideas bigger than the hero, the emotional or philosophical core that defines the story. But Kiriko's cinematic, it's just called Kiriko. Not tradition, not inheritance, it's just her name. It is the only Overwatch cinematic where the title tells you nothing except the name of the product being sold, and that choice says a lot about where Overwatch was at the time of her release. The cinematic begins with Kiriko moving through an apartment building like someone familiar with every floor and every neighbor. She checks in on a young deaf girl, signing to her as they joke and talk, and this part highlights a soft, genuinely charming side of her character. There's a warmth here, a sense of everyday heroism that Overwatch has always excelled at. Then, things escalate. A gang breaks into the hallway and starts threatening the young girl, but Kiriko rushes in to help, blending acrobatics and healing as she weaves through the attackers. Her fox spirit briefly appears to guide her movements, and her abilities, teleportation, healing charms, and protective barriers come to life in a way that's clearly meant to make her feel dynamic and cool. It's a light, almost slice-of-life story about a girl protecting her community, and honestly, if this cinematic stood alone, I think people would have embraced it. It is charm, it is heart. The issue here isn't the cinematic itself, it's what it was released next to. Because when you hold it up against past Overwatch cinematics, it raises questions. Not because it's bad, but because you can feel a tonal shift. Overwatch cinematics once carried emotional baggage. Dragons had grief, Recall had memories, the Wastelander had cultural history, and the Last Bastion had trauma that refuses to disappear. Kiriko's cinematic, in contrast, is fun. It's not wrong for a character to have a softer story, but the timing was terrible. This game had just broken our trust. We wanted depth, we wanted something that proved Overwatch still cared about its world, and instead we got Kiriko. Just Kiriko. Then there's the rest of her lore. Kiriko's origin story suggests that she grew up around the Shimada brothers, and that her mother actually trained all three of them together. This stands out as strange because Hanzo and Genji have previously already been established to be around 40, whereas Kiriko is in her early 20s. The timeline here just doesn't make sense. Dragons takes place across decades of silence and regrets. Kiriko's lore, though, treats those decades like they barely happened, compressing separate eras into a single stretched moment. It unintentionally weakens one of the most emotional arcs in the entire franchise by trying to weave her into a history that she was never a part of. And then there's the fox spirits. Blizzard insists that it isn't supernatural, that it's just cultural symbolism, but Kiriko's abilities are actual teleportation through physical walls, healing talismans, summoning literal glowing energy, and a spectral fox leading allies into battle. These aren't subtle metaphors, they're full-on magical abilities. Hanzo and Genji push the limits of what was believable, but you could still ground them in cybernetics and extreme training. You could believe that these dragons were potentially created using hardlight technology, but Kiriko's powers push it too far. She could have been the bridge between myth and reality, the explanation for how folktale and technology blend in Overwatch's world, but instead, her lore contradictions make the world feel less coherent, not more. Kiriko didn't ruin Overwatch's lore, but she did expose how fragile it had become. By the time she arrived, the narrative wasn't being constructed with the same intention that it used to. The emotional threads that once made this world feel grounded, family conflict, personal guilt, political history, were barely being maintained. Kiriko didn't break the world, she just showed that this world had already stopped holding itself together, and that hit me personally. I loved her kit. I enjoyed playing her, and I still do. But it's hard to ignore the disconnect between who she could have been and what we actually got. Worse, she arrived during a moment when Blizzard desperately needed to prove it still cared about the story, and instead, her introduction made it feel like the story had become secondary. In a game that once grounded its world building in emotional consequence like Hanzo's guilt, Genji's rebirth, and the centuries-old legacy of their clan, Kiriko's introduction felt like Overwatch was no longer concerned with why any of that mattered. A new hero should have felt like a beacon of hope. Instead, Kiriko became the start of a conversation that nobody wanted to have. Is Overwatch still being written with intention, or is it just being assembled? Kiriko's issues go beyond lore, though. Even if her backstory lined up perfectly, there's still something about her personality that feels off. It isn't that she lacks traits, it's that she has too many and they rarely connect to one another in a meaningful way. One moment, she's preparing to eat donuts for dinner, the next, she's invoking centuries-old spiritual wisdom. She'll be gentle and reassuring with her neighbors, then suddenly slick and effortlessly cool as she lands perfect kunai headshots. None of these tones are bad on their own, the problem is that they never merge into a single emotional through line. They don't clash in an interesting way, and they don't complement each other either. They just sit next to each other like qualities chosen from a menu of things Blizzard knows people tend to like. She doesn't feel like a person who grew into who she is, she feels like a character that's been assembled to appeal to as many people as possible. And this becomes even more noticeable when you remember the weight that her backstory should carry. Kiriko grew up in a neighborhood caught between clan traditions and gang violence. Her mother led the Shimada Assassins, a role defined by secrecy, duty, and blood. During the uprising, her mother disappeared, leaving Kiriko torn between old ways and a rapidly changing world. Her home was under threat, and her community needed protection. On paper, this is heavy. This is the kind of backstory that shapes someone deeply, but when you listen to Kiriko speak, her voice lines, her interactions, her presence in the cinematic, charismatic, almost none of that comes through. There's no underlying pressure, no lingering grief, no complicated relationship with the clan that shaped her. She feels like someone who has already healed from a story that the audience never got to see. Compare that with Genji, who speaks like someone who's constantly renegotiating his identity, or Hanzo, who sounds like he wakes up every day trying to make peace with a past he can't undo. Mei's grief informs her kindness, Farah's restraint comes from her sense of duty, and Sombra's humor hides her distrust. Overwatch's strongest characters are specific, shaped by wounds they haven't fully resolved. They feel like they speak with emotional anchors, whereas Kiriko feels like she just doesn't. Or rather, she speaks like someone who has many emotional anchors, but none of them are attached to anything. And then there's the humor. A lot of her dialogue is tuned for viral clips, which isn't inherently bad, but it's disconnected from her emotional core. Most Overwatch heroes have a distinct emotional cadence. Zenyatta always sounds serene, Moira always sounds detached, and Baptiste balances humor with the instincts of someone who's seen too much. Kiriko, by contrast, sounds like whatever the scene needs her to be. Wise, snarky, cute, cool, nurturing, edgy, it changes quickly and cleanly with no cost. She feels frictionless, and that's what makes her stand out in the wrong way. Because Overwatch characters are supposed to be messy. They're supposed to feel like people who've lived through something. The irony here is that Kiriko should have been one of the characters with the most emotional depth. She has the upbringing, she has the cultural ties, the loss, the responsibility, the inherited conflicts, all of the ingredients are here, but the game just never lets those ingredients interact. She ends up feeling airbrushed, emotionally unaffected, even though her story should carry scars. And honestly, I feel it when I play her. Kiriko's kit is fun, and a lot of her voice lines are pretty funny. I like her confidence, and I like her style, but I can't shake the feeling that there's an entire emotional half that's just missing. That there's a version of this hero that makes sense, but unfortunately, we've never met. This is where the frustration comes from. Not because players dislike her personality, but because they can see the outline of a far more grounded, far more compelling character. Kiriko's confidence, her charisma, even her little edge, all of that could have worked beautifully if the emotional core behind her had been allowed to exist. One of the things that made Overwatch 1 feel special was the balance between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. The game was fun on its own, the characters are unique, the movement was fluid, and teamfights played out like puzzles you were always learning to solve. That was the intrinsic side. You played because playing felt good. But the extrinsic rewards mattered too, and Overwatch 1 handled them with a grace we didn't fully appreciate at the time. Loot boxes weren't perfect, but they rewarded you for simply spending time in the game. You didn't grind currencies, track shop rotations, or worry about falling behind. You played, you leveled up, you opened a box, and you got something. A voice line, a highlight intro, a skin, some small expression of identity. And because Overwatch 1 wasn't free to play, cosmetics weren't sculpted around conversion metrics or behavioral funnels. Skins felt like celebrations of the cast, not revenue streams. Over time, everyone got something. The game rewarded you for play, not purchase. Overwatch 2, however, shifted that balance completely. With the move to free-to-play, extrinsic motivation didn't just support the game, it became the structure of the game. The shop, battle pass, rotating bundles, limited time cosmetics, FOMO mechanics, all of these replaced the old reward system. Identity transformed from something you earned naturally into something you had to pursue. Suddenly, the question wasn't, who do I enjoy playing, but which hero is the game telling me to invest in? And whether Blizzard meant to or not, the answer to that question was Kiriko. As of the time I'm making this video, Kiriko, an Overwatch 2 hero, has 38 skins. For comparison, Echo has 26, Baptiste has 27, and Sigma has 28. The problem here is that all of these heroes have been in the game longer than Kiriko. All are Overwatch 1 heroes, and yet Kiriko, a new hero, has surpassed all of them in skins in just 3 years. This isn't a small difference, it's a visible pattern. And I say this as someone who has bought multiple Kiriko skins myself. Her Himiko Toga skin from the MHA collab is adorable, and her Blue Flame skin from the Le Seraphim collab might actually be one of my favorites in the game. I really like pairing her new mythic weapon with it. I'm not above this system, I'm actively participating in it, but me liking this stuff doesn't make the pattern any less real. Kiriko gets more cosmetics, more consistency, and more variety than nearly every other hero in the game. She headlines events, anchors battle passes, appears in shop bundles constantly, and is used for marketing in a way that most heroes simply aren't. One of the clearest examples of this is the Streetwear collection. About half of these skins were available in the $10 battle pass from Season 18, while the other half were in the shop for $40. This is one of the Overwatch 2 bundles I actually bought. I genuinely love the look of all of these skins. There's some of the ones I wear the most, even over some of the collabs, but here's what has me frustrated. Kiriko's Streetwear skin was the final tier of the battle pass, and while I know that sounds like nothing on the surface, Kiriko has also had a spot in like half of the battle passes I've played since I returned in Season 12. For comparison, Freya's been in 0, Hazard's been in 1, Reaper's been in 1, and Sombra's been in 2. Once again, the problem here is that all of these heroes deserve more. All of these heroes in the $40 bundle needed this cheaper $10 spot more than she did, but the devs either didn't notice or didn't care. From the outside, it doesn't look like Kiriko is simply popular, it looks like she's being positioned as popular. Why is she consistently the focal point? Why aren't other heroes getting that same spotlight? This matters because cosmetics in Overwatch are not superficial. They are how players express identity, loyalty, personality, and attachment. They are how someone says, "This is my hero, this is who I am." So when Kiriko continues to receive new skins, highlight intros, emotes, and theme bundles at a pace that other heroes don't, especially older heroes who quite literally built the foundation of this video game, it doesn't feel like an oversight, it feels intentional. Zarya, a launch hero, has not received a single new highlight intro across the entire lifespan of Overwatch 2. Other original heroes have gone literal years without meaningful cosmetic additions, and even the new heroes introduced after Kiriko have launched with noticeably less support. Juno, Hazard, Freya, and Wu Yang all released with no legendary skins at launch, and some of their cosmetics appear rushed, or at the very least, visually inconsistent compared to earlier standards. This is where the industry plant joke comes from. Kiriko was not just a new character, she became the face that Blizzard chose to push because her design was marketable, broad, polished, and extremely easy to sell. Whether Blizzard intended that or not, the result is the same. Kiriko is not presented as one hero among many, she is presented as the default mascot of Overwatch 2's new economy. Sojourn and Junker Queen launched alongside her. All three were presented as the start of a new era, the new pillars of Overwatch 2, but while Sojourn and Junker Queen blended into the roster after their first wave of cosmetics, Kiriko never stopped receiving content. The cadence, the variety, the priority was different. So when players say Kiriko feels like she was designed to sell skins, they are not being dramatic. They are responding to a real, measurable disparity in how the game distributes attention and resources. Kiriko is not just a hero, she became the face of an economy, and that's a role that no hero can carry without consequence. At this point, it's fair to say the frustration around Kiriko did not come out of nowhere. It did not just appear one day, there are real reasons people feel the way they do, and honestly, that's what makes this whole situation sting. Because Kiriko is fun. According to the new progression system, she's one of my most played heroes in Overwatch 2. I love her movement, her tempo, the way she threads between positions, and keeps fights alive. She has a really powerful presence in Stadium, she's definitely one of my most played characters and that, but liking something doesn't mean you suddenly stop seeing the full picture. Kiriko's introduction landed at the worst possible moment. The canceled campaign left the community feeling frustrated and directionless. Her lore contradicted the emotional tone of stories like Dragons, and then development on that lore basically froze. Her personality tried to be everything at once, which made her feel like she wasn't anchored to anything. Her cosmetic supports overshadowed most of the roster, and her debut got tied to the new monetization system in a way that other heroes simply haven't had to deal with. And while I really don't think we need a long breakdown of her kit, many players feel like she's carrying far more power than she should. Her survivability, utility, and burst potential stack together in a way that feel bloated. Not broken, just too much. But again, this wasn't something Kiriko created. Overwatch 1 heroes had already been gradually inflating kits long before she arrived. I think she just happened to appear at the moment that build-up finally hit its tipping point. All of this happened during a time when Overwatch 2's reputation was at its absolute lowest. The game sat at an overwhelmingly negative rating on Steam, something that felt impossibly dramatic for a franchise that once symbolized hope. But what's interesting is that over the past year, that score has actually shifted upwards to mixed. And I think that shift reflects something real. The game is changing, the devs are listening, and players are slowly starting to feel that again. And that's the Kiriko Conundrum. She isn't a bad character, she's a character who entered this game at a time when the game itself didn't know what it wanted to be. Some of that weight may never fully leave her. I don't think there will ever be a version of Overwatch where Kiriko is as universally loved as Tracer or Reinhardt. The timing, the expectations, the context, all of this matters. But Overwatch is changing again, and for the first time in a long while, it feels like the developers remember what this game is supposed to be. The lore has momentum again. The new in-game codex finally gathers story beats and cinematics in one place. New comics for Ramatra, Sojourn, and Juno dropped only weeks apart, and the cinematics are back as well. Blizzard stopped making these after Junker Queen Kiriko and Sojourns, possibly discouraged by how few views Sojourns actually got, but now they're back. The newer cinematics don't seem to have as high of a budget as the old ones, but you can still feel the spark. Control, Hazardous Tactics, The Hunt Begins, Elemental Kin, and the most recent La Lupa. All of these have somehow captured the same feeling I had when I first saw dragons. La Lupa in particular is worth slowing down for because like dragons, and even like Kiriko, it defines a character in just a few minutes. Vendetta faces off against a massive Omnic inside a roaring coliseum. The scale is closer to the giant robot from Zero Hour than anything seen in the standard story missions. The crowd is electric, cheering her on like this is pure spectacle, but the narration undercuts all of that. While Vendetta fights, she's thinking about her father, about the lessons he taught her, about the strategy he drilled into her. As the Omnic's about to overwhelm her, she flashes back to the moment that shaped her entire life, Antonio Bartolotti, her father, being murdered by Reaper. This is a death longtime players remember. A lot of us actually had a chance to play through this during the Retribution's Archive mission back in 2018, but now we're seeing this same moment recontextualized through her eyes. It instantly ties her motivations to one of Overwatch's most memorable moments. When she finally steadies herself, recalls her father's guidance, and slices down the Omnic with one massive final blow, it's not just a cool finisher, it's a moment of clarity. She isn't fighting for glory, she isn't fighting for entertainment, she's fighting for a vendetta. A vendetta against Overwatch, against Talon, against everyone who took her world away, who took her father away. This is the difference between where Overwatch was when Kiriko launched and where it is today. Vendetta's arrival feels connected to the rest of the world. It feels like it's respecting existing storylines. It builds outward from something real instead of trying to retrofit something new. And the actual game itself reflects that shift. Loot boxes returned, 6v6 returned, and Overwatch Classic is a nice nostalgic experience. Perks and Stadium proved that the devs can still experiment without discarding the core of what Overwatch is. Competitive has real structure now, real transparency, even hero bans, and smaller corrections like pulling back mirrored drafts or undoing best of 5 in Stadium show that the team is genuinely listening. For me, all of this has meant something. I started playing Overwatch on Xbox in 2016 with a few friends from high school. Almost a decade later, I've switched over to PC, but I'm still here, still playing Overwatch with people I met back then. One of my closest friends only recently got into hero shooters because of Marvel Rivals, but thanks to that, I was able to get him into some crossplay games with Stadium, and it's been awesome. The fact that Overwatch is finding itself again, right at the moment that I'm reconnecting with it, feels special. It feels like a second chance I wasn't sure this game would ever get. Vendetta represents that. She shows what happens when a new hero arrives with clarity and purpose. Kiriko showed how chaotic things can get when a when new hero launches into a world that isn't even sure of its own identity. Overwatch began with a message that was never meant as marketing. The world could always use more heroes. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like it believes that again. Now somehow, we just need to get Kiriko to believe it too. I've been thinking a lot about where I want this channel to go. I know I could probably grow faster if I just focused on making Overwatch videos. I've got plenty of ideas for more, and YouTube really seemed to like the last one, but I've also been down that road before. I used to just make Pokemon videos in the past, but that burnt me out pretty hard, and I really don't want to repeat that. At the same time though, I don't want to ignore what people like, so right now I'm kinda stuck in the middle. Should I lean into the success of the Sombra solution, or should I keep rolling the YouTube dice to see if I get lucky with other kinds of content? Let me know what y'all think, and thank you for sticking around.